Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Inside Scoop. There is never a moment or a component in life where you're not interacting with the law. Actually, studies show that 1 in 4 low-income persons experience some sort of interaction with the law. Well, tonight we're going to talk about equal access or justice, or equal access to justice in the law. We have with us legal expert Nermin AbdelWahab. Nermin,
how are
hi.
you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, I'm really excited to have this discussion. So before we get into aspects of the law and access to justice and racial injustice, let's talk about your background. So what made you first want to study law?
I was raising 2 children with special needs in New York City, in the Bronx, and I was having a really hard time figuring out what I needed to do to get my kids the best access to the education that they needed. And I heard an NPR story about a bunch of rich New Yorkers suing the state, the New York City public schools, to get their kids in private school. And I couldn't afford to get an attorney, and I tried to call a bunch of legal aids, and nobody was able to provide me with representation. And I realized this was an area that desperately needed some people to join the legal fight and make sure our kids were getting a proper education. So I went to law school thinking I would do special education law, and I have done a little bit, but I ended up really enjoying litigating and being a trial attorney, and I really enjoy the dynamics in the courtroom, and I think I'm going to pursue a career more litigating and trial. Sometimes you give it a shot somewhere and you realize you have better skills in a different area.
So you were already adulting.
I was already adulting. I was adulting very young.
Yes, and you said, you know what, I have this issue here. I'm going to see what the criminal justice system or the criminal legal system has to offer me. Mm-hmm. Didn't offer as much as you needed.
And it was the civil system at that point. I was trying to find a way to file something called a due process complaint, and couldn't do it myself, couldn't find a way to file it, and really decided I was going to buckle down, finish my undergraduate degree, and start looking at law schools.
Right, so you were in Hunter College in the Bronx.
Yeah. Yep.
Fast forward, you decided to go to UDC, actually.
I did.
To get your law degree.
I did. My family was here, and I had best piece of advice I'd ever gotten from our pre-law counselor at Hunter College, and she told me, you're going to need support, so you can look at New York, where you have family, and DC. You cannot look at Michigan or Ohio or California. You're going to need extra hands on deck if you're going to make it through law school. And I did. I moved back home. My parents pitched in, helped me, take care of my children and helped me manage my schedule, and I was able to make it through UDC. I did the part-time program, which is an evening program, so that was useful, and I worked during the day.
Okay, so it says, according to your bio, that you focus on serving marginalized and underprivileged communities, but you said initially you thought that you were going to go into special education law. Mm-hmm. So what did you see that made you want to kind of turn to?
So I started working at Legal Services of Northern Virginia. LS&V, Legal Services of Northern Virginia, is a nonprofit law firm that has 5 offices locally, including one in Fairfax. And I just applied, got a job, started doing family law. I figured it was a good way to start learning about what was happening in Virginia, how to get involved. I knew that they did, LS&V does do education cases, so that was open to me. And I did take a few education cases while I was there. But I did mostly family law for 4 years, and then I switched to housing and consumer for a little bit. I did eviction prevention and foreclosure prevention. I switched to that during the COVID pandemic, so I was able to make sure more people stayed in their home. And I really enjoy the community lawyering of legal aid. I really did find it to be a fantastic place to start my legal career.
Yeah. And so when it comes to Legal Services of Northern Virginia, there are just an assortment of services that are offered by the organization. You recently did a podcast that I listened to that was super helpful. What was the name of that podcast again?
Crime Time?
Yes.
It's Crime Time. It's local defense attorneys from the Fairfax Bar mostly, all great people. You should definitely go listen to Crime Time if you have a chance.
I really loved that interview. You said there were so many nuggets, but you said if you are poor, you are not allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah, I truly believe that, both in the criminal and civil systems. If you make a mistake, say you fall behind in a car payment, if you're poor, your car's parked outside, more likely to get repossessed. If you're rich and and you're late a few months and it's parked in your garage, who's going to know how to get it? There are just these little things that happen that build onto each other. If you fall behind, you lost your job, you fall behind on your rent, the repercussions and the aid to help people who are renters is just much less. There are programs. You can do a loan modification if you're a mortgage holder, an owner of a property. Just the different levels of the repercussions when you fall behind, or when things are messed up, or when you don't have access to credit. Like, you can put a car payment on your credit card if you have credit. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you're not paying, the 400 or 500% you might pay at a title loan place or whatnot. Thank God Virginia has really pulled in those more predatory loans, but people are still able to get them, though illegally to be done in Virginia, online. Wow. And those loans are like a revolving door of just, it's a hole you can never dig yourself out of. That's highly recommend you do not get a payday loan, anybody who's listening to this.
Yes. And that's so important that you point out. There's something else that you said on the podcast. You said, when you give people basic legal knowledge, they are more likely to abide by the rules. And we'll get into access to justice, or just education on justice and the legal system to make those educated decisions. But that is so true when you know about payday loans and even the wide range of access tow companies have to low-income communities. That helps you just kind of see, maybe wade through the waters of our legal system. But let's go back to legal services in Northern Virginia that help folks in those situations. So consumer law, elder law, family law, human trafficking, just to name a few services available through legal services of Northern Virginia, housing law, public benefits, child advocacy and education law, veterans law, reentry law. Yeah. So let's go back a bit. So talking about family law and child support. I have so many friends and family that can relate to either pending child support issues or child support issues that they're going through right now. So one thing that I wrote down, that child support in this country is a multi-billion-dollar debt in the U.S. And I think over 80% of those debtors are Black men. So talk about that, your experience just in that area of law.
So, I mean, we have started to make positive changes in Virginia, but definitely one of the bigger problems we have is if you are on TANF, they will go and try to find the father of the children and make them pay back your TANF loan.
So what is that, TANF?
TANF, can't even remember what the T stands for.
Temporary assistance for needy families. Gotcha.
Yes.
TANF. Okay.
Yes. So, so in Virginia, they're allowed to do that if you're getting TANF or if you're getting child care subsidies. They are also allowed to do that for SNAP, for food assistance, but they don't do it as often. But it does happen, and one of the reasons that impacts low-income communities at a higher rate is those people who are receiving TANF are going to be low-income individuals. So it does affect Black and brown communities at a much higher rate. Even, and this is, I understand maybe changing, and I don't want to speak too badly because, there's both sides. One side needs money, the other side, needs to be held a little bit responsible. I do think that in Virginia, the nicest thing we have is that this is a math problem. It is pretty fair the way they come across it. It is a percentage of your income, and it is, you know, dependent on both parties being what they make and what they bring to the table. And it is possible that even though there are children, if one income is way higher than another, that income may have to pay spousal support, even if they're taking care of the kids. So this is, it's really a math problem. And it's pretty simple and decently fair. I think the biggest issue is that most people don't know that if there is a change in your income, you need to notify child support enforcement or the court system, depending on where your order came from. And you need to go through that process and file for a modification. I do think that, thinking of the question you asked and how to address it, it's important that, you know, when you're going through a separation or a divorce or child support and custody, these are very tense moments in people's lives. And a lot of times couples are really okay with coming up with a even, simple number where they feel like everybody's comfortable.
Did you say that most couples are okay?
Some couples. Okay. But if you are below the poverty line and accessing these programs, your right to say what you're comfortable with gets taken away. So it's both sides, you know. If you need childcare in order to work and you're getting a childcare subsidy, it's really difficult to prevent the city or the state from going after the father of the children. I do want to remind anybody who finds their income changed for whatever reason, you lost your job, you become disabled, you're incarcerated, you need to notify the court system that has ordered that or child support enforcement as soon as possible.
So what are some of the services that, or you know what, no. So what are some of the questions most people ask when they're in a situation where they need child support? Help with child support.
So I think one of the biggest things is that people feel like they have a right to everything. So they have a right to child support and sole custody and no visits. And that's not how our system is designed. The child has a right to child support and to have a relationship with both parents. So that means that I make this joke that like being a parent is a bundle of sticks. You have your rights and your responsibilities. I use it all the time. I use it for homeowners, for everything. When you have a right as a parent or as a person, you have your responsibilities and you have your rights. Wow. And your rights are for some visits, so have a relationship with your child, and your responsibilities are always child support.
Okay. Make sure you come right back as we continue our conversation with Nermin AbdelWahab on legal services of Northern Virginia.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
You're not the kind of guy that makes the girls all sigh.
2 for $3.
They never turn their heads and look when you walk by. 'Cause it's the little things.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Helping.
What a nice young man.
Pass it on.
My goodness.
You are not what you got.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
I better get out of here. Ooh.
Get it.
Get it.
Get it.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill, bring good home.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thank you so much for coming back and joining us on Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with Nermin AbdelWahab on legal services of Northern Virginia and just the topic of access to justice in this state. Now, Nermin, I know that you're actually no longer with the Northern Virginia Legal Services Organization, but you've done a lot of work there.
Yes, I have spent the last 6 years there. I just recently left, and I'm waiting to join a new opportunity.
Okay, great. So going back to what we were talking about initially, well, child support specifically. So if someone is incarcerated, a lot of people think that when they are incarcerated, they're just vulnerable. There's nothing they can do essentially. If they're on the hook for child support, they're just kind of accumulating that debt. Do you have a right if you are incarcerated when it comes to child support?
You do. You have a right to let the court know that your income has changed, and they will set a lower amount. There is a required minimum, and I'm not positive what that minimum is right now if it's gone up, but it will be less than $100 probably for one child. So, and if you were paying $300, that's a good decrease. The court may find even, depending on everything, it may even be lower because, say, mother's income, father's income has increased, the custodial parent's income has increased, and they may find that the numbers don't work out the same anymore.
Wow. You said something else interesting on the podcast. You mentioned when it comes to child support, if someone wants to sign up for TANF, again, temporary assistance for needy families, they have to answer questions when it comes to child support, but those questions don't necessarily impact what the state can and can't do for you?
Well, they do. You have to name the parent, the non-custodial parents, and they will try to go after the non-custodial parents. You do have a right, if you are fleeing a domestic violence relationship, to state that you are not interested in pursuing child support based on the fact that you are fleeing a violent relationship. So it is important to know that, because I think a lot of times victims feel pressured to provide information when they are just trying to keep their families safe.
Yeah. Another issue, a really important issue, especially in Fairfax County, is housing law. So again, on the website, it talks about landlord-tenant eviction cases, utility cutoff, but also tenant assertion cases for tenants seeking to improve living conditions and require landlord compliance with local housing codes.
So there is two different portions of this law. There's the tenant's assertion, as you stated, which is you've asked for a repair, the repair is not done timely, you can file something called a tenant's assertion. I recommend that whenever you're filing a tenant's assertion, to make sure that you go ahead and give the landlord written notice. Check your lease if there's an address where you need to send the written notice. Even if you're usually emailing or texting, I would go ahead and send a more formal written notice to whatever says on the lease, as well as let them know by your regular means of communication. Tell them you have until this date to correct this problem. I'll give you some examples from my time. Flooding toilet, leaking roof, kitchen sink that is not usable. Those are all issues, depending on how bad. A flooding toilet could go up to a different thing, an ouster. But we will stick with the tenant's assertion. That's minor repairs. You need to give them a reasonable time. The code does say 30 days is considered reasonable. If the landlord doesn't do anything, you can walk into the courthouse and ask for a tenant's assertion document and fill it out, file the filing fee, and move on. If you are low income, go ahead and ask for them to waive those fees. It's just a form that you fill out. They'll take it back to the judge and see if you get approved. Also, feel free to give Legal Services of Northern Virginia or whatever local legal services that you have in your community a call and see if they're willing to help you, at least provide some advice. They can sometimes just draft that original notice for you. They may take it for full representation. So that's tenant's assertions. Now the ouster. The ouster is a much bigger deal. It's been recently bolstered by the state legislatures. Now you can get as much as $5,000 in damages. A traditional ouster is when a landlord changes the locks without going through the regular eviction process. Wow. If a landlord changes your locks, you just show up at court, say I need an emergency hearing, fill out the ouster form, speak to a judge. You may not get the $5,000 ordered at that point. It will probably happen in a later hearing, but the judge may order at that point that the landlord has to let you back in.
How common is that though for a landlord?
Surprisingly more common than you would think.
Wow.
Mostly they're landlords who haven't talked to an attorney, because if they've spoken to an attorney, they will tell you. But I've had cases where the landlord, a major building, didn't realize that the tenant was in the process of moving, thought the tenant had abandoned the place, changed the locks. I'm on the phone, 5:30, demanding they let him back in, or I'll be filing next working day. So it happens more often than not. A lot of times, the rules are very specific. You need to go through this eviction process. Half the time, people leave stuff behind when they, and nothing happens. But, if you don't have a written notice that they're handing over possession, or they haven't come by and dropped off the keys, that's a huge risk you take by changing the locks. Wow. And, most people who speak to an attorney know not to do that. Sometimes attorneys will reach out and say, we think this client has abandoned the property. Can you confirm this? Right. So it happens more often than you'd think. But it doesn't just have to be a lockout. It can be necessary services. So running water, I wish I'd looked up the code. The code has some specifics. We haven't had as much luck with bed bugs, but we've had better luck with rodents, because I believe the code mentions rodents. So there are these other things that make a property not safe for human habitability. Yeah. And if that's an issue with your property, you want to pull up that code, you want to read it, you want to call a legal services that's in your community and see if they can help you out. Those cases are generally given priority across the state and across the country. People who don't have a home because somebody changed their locks. Maybe there's medication that they don't have access to. If you're a diabetic, if you have an illness, there are so many things that can happen when the locks are changed or when you don't have access to your property for some reason.
Just from a historical perspective, though, so we're talking about a landlord changing the locks. We're talking about rodents. We're talking about pest control. These are issues that are going to affect a certain demographic, a certain impoverished communities versus communities of higher income. And so we can't talk about housing law without really looking at the historical implications of that, like covenants, and how they've affected even gentrification and how it affects property value. So talk about that.
Definitely in Fairfax, any Friday, anybody who's free wants to go and watch the eviction docket, you will see a theme. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the theme. There is a lot of young Black women in that eviction docket. There are whole communities out there where it's just a very, very different than what we think of when we think of Fairfax, Virginia. And majority of the properties that are at that Friday eviction docket are communities on the Route 1 corridor, a community that has been historically Black for a long time. That Gum Springs area, that area there. So they are quicker to file. They do a bad job in taking care of their properties. I question whether or not service is always done properly in those communities, and it is an issue. And it's true. Overall, you go to the Fairfax courthouse, sit outside a courtroom and just watch, and it does not look like the same community that shops at Tyson's Corner. And it's just a very different, the people who have interaction with our civil and criminal justice system are people that look like me and you, not like my neighbors or your neighbors, and so it's really clear, it's a really stark difference in those rooms, what is happening. And the eviction docket is particularly uncomfortable because they walk in, They show up, a lot of people do show up and say, I do owe the money. They are honest, thinking that the judge will give them more time. And if you say you owe the money and it is a rent case, they're gonna enter a judgment right there. And if you disagree at all with, if you disagree, it's a penny more than your math, say you do not owe that amount, if you wanna fight it at all. If you show up and you can see people come with their whole families and try to ask for some lenience, and the system is not designed for lenience. The system is designed to move on and vacate that apartment as soon as possible.
So I think it's, with what we're dealing with right now with the education system when it comes to giving a certain narrative or teaching a certain narrative when it comes to how we got to where we are right now, I think you cannot look at that situation that you mentioned as far as what you'll see on you called it the eviction docket, without understanding that there was a purposeful cutoff of access to generational wealth hundreds of years ago that's still having an impact today. And I think that is a perfect example as to why it's so important to teach history accurately. This didn't just happen in a silo.
And I mean, we have a system that is designed to protect the interests of those who have wealth.
Yeah.
It's really about that. When people come to me and say, I want to sue somebody for $700, I'm like, there is not an attorney in this state that is going to take this case because the most it's going to be worth is $700. It just doesn't. But if you come to me and say you want to sue somebody and you think it's going to be $1 million case, that's a case worth taking. So the system is designed to protect wealth and to continue the system that it came from. You recreate itself. It recreates itself. So those with access to wealth can get an attorney who can protect their interests, and those who don't have access to wealth, and $700 may be their monthly income.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a very different system for them, what they can access. They could file in small claims court, you know, but it's still, you're not going to find an attorney. You're not going to be able to get the same kind of representation because attorneys are a service for hire. Unless you go to a legal aid, it's a service for hire. You're paying by the hour,
right.
Or by 33% of what you get.
Wow.
So it just is. It's that kind of system. So,
wow, such good information, folks. Please make sure you don't go anywhere. Stay with us as we continue our conversation about access to justice with Nermin AbdelWahab. Please stay right where you are and come back and join us here on Inside Scoop.
Stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. All of the ones get on. Very sad when all that I could do was remember you. You know I usually say no, but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, yeah, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you What did...
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Thank you so much for joining us or coming back actually to our show here on Inside Scoop with our conversation with Nermin AbdelWahab. Am I doing your name justice?
You are doing it justice. It is a complicated name.
It was such a great conversation that we were having about housing, and we left off with how we got to where we are right now when it comes to housing laws and just the cutoff of access to justice for Black communities and how that's still prevalent. And you can see evidence of that in the eviction court that you talked about. But foreclosure prevention due to COVID, are those funds still available?
There are still funds available. The last time I checked, which was about a month ago, I believe they've actually increased the limit to $50,000. If you are behind on your mortgage, please contact the Virginia Mortgage Relief Program and apply for some mortgage relief. Particularly if you lost any type of income due to COVID. And that can be anything from extra cost because you were sick a few days, you had to take some time off, you lost your job, even temporarily, even if you've been working for recently, you still are eligible to apply to that program. So please apply if you're behind on your mortgage. There are other things you can do. You can ask for a loan modification, which can also take your loan from a 30-year, say you have 20 or 10 years, and add another few years, as much as 40 years actually, and so that'll bring your payments down. The other thing they could do is if you're just behind and able to restart your mortgage, you can ask for that mortgage to be put as a deferred, what's due, what you're in the arrears, move it to the end as a deferred payment. So those are all options depending on what kind of loan you have. Generally, those are federally backed loans that have those programs, but a lot of people have those federally backed loans.
That's also making the assumption that you're a property owner.
Yes.
What if you're not a property owner? And what if you're on rental assistance and you've still fallen behind or there's this trickle down because of COVID? Are there any options for?
Not anymore. Fairfax did spend all of its rental assistance funds. So those programs are not as fleshed out. There are a few, you may be able to get a few $1,000s. At one point we were getting $15,000, $20,000. The people were behind for a year. If you're just a few months behind, you may be able to apply to the community service board. Why can't I remember the name of it? Community service planning.
Okay.
I have to remember the name. I'm sorry.
Okay. Look her up on LinkedIn. If you want answers to these questions, make sure you look her up on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And there are other programs in Fairfax run through nonprofits, so you should definitely look into mortgage rental assistance. Even the Catholic Diocese runs a small program offering a few $1,000s. But if you're behind because of COVID and it's been a few years now, you may not be able to get that amount. They may be able to assist you in moving costs and a deposit in a new place.
Gotcha. So since we're talking about access to justice and rental assistance and just the financial implications of being, low income, it's just so interesting that there's an aversion to law, actually. If you tell someone 9 times out of 10 from the Black community or a marginalized community to go to the courthouse to ask for help, there's going to be an aversion there because those communities are typically over-policed, but also underserved over-policed by our legal system, but at the same time underserved by our legal system.
This is true. The access to knowledge, the access to the courthouse itself. The courthouse is in the middle of Fairfax City. If you are living on some of the other, Reston, Route 1 corridor, getting to Fairfax City is actually super complicated if you do not drive, and you know it's difficult to get there. People have a lot of negative feelings attached to the courthouse. Maybe they were there for a child support case before, or they were there for a criminal issue, and it can feel. I always I always find it interesting how nervous people are when speaking to a judge, when entering a courtroom. They are just people. We are all just people. Remember that if you have some kind of, speak clearly. If somebody has told you, ask for something, ask for it. If you've reached out to an attorney or legal services or a different legal aid and they've provided you with some information, use that information. I've definitely been able to help people advocate for themselves. Sometimes the truth is we just don't have enough attorneys to provide everybody with legal services. The gap between the number of attorneys necessary to meet the need in low-income communities and those that are being funded is very large. We call this the justice gap. For every one legal aid attorney we probably need 3. Wow. At least to meet the need. So just listen if you've spoken to somebody, follow the guidance that they've given you. I've definitely seen people, manage to tell a judge, this is happening, and the judge understand what's happening and give that person their rights. But it is hard to speak up, and people who have had these complicated relationships with the justice system can find it very difficult. They miss their court date, they refuse to go to the eviction case, they get default judgments, consumer cases the same. I did want to add something there about speaking to what you need to do when you are in a courtroom. Be respectful, but also remember that when the judge gives you the opportunity to speak, it is your chance to say what you need to say. I recommend that you always speak to somebody beforehand. If you're not qualified for legal services, for whatever reason, there is a lot of local lawyer referral services. The Fairfax Bar runs one, and the Virginia State Bar runs one. And usually those are $35 for a free consultation, for a 35-minute consultation. So those are good services if you have anything that you are going to be in court and you're nervous about. If you have a traffic ticket for driving without getting your sticker done, just get it done and show up with that. No need to talk to an attorney. Right, yeah. Usually the cop will tell you that. But
so before we go on, though, I think it's to say that for the most part, yes, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. If a judge asks you a question, then yes, you want to tell them, make sure you answer. If a judge gives you the opportunity to speak, make sure you take that opportunity. But if you come from a community that is generally underserved and over-policed, and they don't feel represented, and they don't feel heard, and they feel criminalized when it comes to law enforcement because that's their interaction, do you think it's easy to say, well, make sure you say something to the judge without taking into consideration these people don't know what to say, or they feel like anything they can and say will be used against them in the court of law?
Well, like I said, speak to an attorney. Take the time, call one of these lawyer referral services if you don't qualify for legal services, and take the time. I know it is, sometimes a lot to ask for that to pay that $30 or $35 or $45 if the price has gone up, but there are programs to help you figure out what you need to do. If it's a criminal case, I'm not going to provide advice on that. Yeah. I don't do criminal defense, but you should speak to whoever, there is a public defender and court-appointed attorneys. You should deal with that. I want to also say that I'm speaking in generalities and hypos. Any legal situation you have, you speak to your own attorney. Yes. I do not know the specifics. Maybe, you heard me talk about child support earlier, and I said go and ask for a modification. It's possible that that's going to end up getting you more money, having to pay more because turns out your income went up and you didn't realize it. You should speak to an attorney before filing anything, unless you can show very clearly that you understand the rules and what's happening. And really, there's nothing better than some legal advice. That's why legal services and legal aids exist. There are a whole lot of programs out there. There are programs in which you can ask an attorney online a simple question. You can find that on LSNV's website, Legal Help. There's a lot of information out there. Do the work. And I know it's scary to be called into a courtroom. People don't even like to show up when they're subpoenaed as a witness. But if you are subpoenaed, you kind of need to go.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to, and I know you don't want to. Nobody wants to be there, even those of us who are being paid to be there. But it is important that you read every document carefully. You speak to an attorney if you have questions. And I know that when you are over-policed, when your interactions with the law are always confrontational, it can feel really overwhelming. But unless you go and ask for help, everything feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Take the time, go ask for help. Find an attorney who will speak to you. You will find one. You will find one. Yes, you may need to, and I understand low-income communities is so hard. Yeah. But if you reach out to legal services and they can't provide, they can maybe provide you they provide the lawyer referral services for anything that they do not handle. So, and there is a statewide, Virginia Poverty Law Center has a great website. If you're looking for legal information, there's so much information out there.
Actually, so next week, Nancy LaRue from the Virginia Poverty Law Center is going to be on Inside Scoop, so make sure you tune in for that. So that's a perfect segue, actually, when you talk. Go ahead, you're going to say
something.
They're
an amazing advocate. You're going to have so much fun. You have to tune into that show. I will definitely be watching.
Thank you so much for that. When it comes to access to an attorney, though, you mentioned a couple of minutes ago just like the need in that space for more attorneys. And again, from your podcast that you were on, you mentioned, let's just talk about the compensation for legal professionals in Virginia. You've got public defenders. Well, let's just talk about that, actually. And I know this is going to lead into our next segment, but what's the difference between a public defender and a court-appointed attorney?
So a public defender, there are offices. Fairfax has its public defender offices. A lot of the local jurisdictions have their own office, and some of them don't have an office. And in that case, all of the cases will be handled by court-appointed criminal defense attorneys. The court-appointed criminal defense attorneys are usually paid an hourly rate through the court is very low. You probably, my understanding is that income is probably not the same as a staff attorney or a public defender's office, a PD1 or a PD2, public defender 1 or public defender 2. Those get paid a lot more than maybe the court-appointed work does. And then right below that is probably legal aid attorneys. We make a very low amount of money compared to those two, though it is increasing.
Okay, I know you all want to come back and finish this conversation. Make sure you come right back here on Inside Scoop.
I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtlebeck.
You so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See you, dude. See ya. You never mean you're well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And thank you so much for coming back and joining us here on Inside Scoop as we continue our conversation with Nermin AbdelWahab. We've had such a great conversation, Nermin. During our last conversation, or during the last segment, excuse me, we were talking about public defenders versus court-appointed attorneys. Excuse me. But there's another aspect, that there's legal aid professionals. Can you talk a bit about that group, and then a comparison of salary when it comes to prosecutors? Why that disparity?
So definitely prosecutors in the state of Virginia have a much higher salary. I understand that the prosecutors deal with every criminal case that walks into the courthouse, or most of the criminal cases that walk through the courthouse. But that doesn't make the difference in salary for the public defender's offices and the Commonwealth's attorney. It's even though they may need more attorneys, there shouldn't be a difference in their salary. They're doing two sides of the same lawsuit often. And if we don't pay our public defenders enough, we are basically saying we don't believe in innocence as much as we believe in guilt.
Wow.
To me, it feels very clear that we need to provide proper funding so people are willing to learn the job properly and stay in the job. Same happens with our legal aid attorneys. Across this country, there are vacancies in legal aids, and it is really hard to the belief that legal aid is where people start their career, not where they end it, and you spend a few years, and we train great trial attorneys only to let them free to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
is not a good way to run a nonprofit or run a successful organization. And so we should be looking at ways to keep our talent in-house, to keep that talent where they need to be. And that means increasing the pay across the board for the court-appointed work, for the public defenders, and for the civil side, for those legal services attorneys. The prosecuting office in Fairfax have done a great job in advocating for themselves, and that's fine. But we would really like to see the wages become equalized. At least I would. I just don't understand how we think that this is an okay system, that we are going to pay those people who are working for the most marginalized, the people who really need it the most, and tell them, we don't value your work.
So the whole reason that we need an increase or more attorneys is because the need is so great. So before we were talking about those who are low income, and we talked about those struggling with mental health perhaps, or how a mental health struggle may impact access to income or a job or education. But what about folks who are dealing with both of those? If you're low income and you have a mental health struggle?
I mean, any kind of disability, it doesn't even have to be a mental health. If you have a mobility issue, having to deal with an access to the building may be an issue. Just being able to get into the building, get to the right courtroom. There have definitely been times where people have shown up to an eviction case in a wheelchair. And it's difficult managing. The courthouse has escalators. You've got to walk around and figure out where the elevator is. If you can take the escalator, you're going to get there a lot quicker. So everything from mobility issues to mental health issues. If you're depressed and you're having anxiety issues, that can compound is the word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Compound the ability for you to make it into court on time. And we definitely see that those people, yes, We see Black and brown people have, interactions. We see with the justice system more often. We see low-income people having more contact with the justice system, whether it's civil or criminal. And we see that people with disabilities, it just compounds. It makes it much more harder to get that access to justice. It may be harder to even make that phone call to legal aid to get help, because it's hard to deal with these things. Anxiety will make it worse. So it's just it just combines the problems. Fairfax does have a couple of new programs. So if you feel like you need help, you should ask for help. I know that the commercial that was just playing was a phone number and an email, a website to visit. Ask for help, and if people ask if you have a disability, I know that it can be uncomfortable, but you should let them know if you are comfortable enough to say that, and ask for whether it's an accommodation. Legal Services of Northern Virginia, I've definitely done accommodation requests for people in housing cases, in family law cases, and in education cases. So those are things that you can do. If you don't know how to do an accommodation request, speak to an attorney. There's a lot of information on the Americans with Disability Act online. There's definitely, people have put out templates on how to write these available. So you can ask for those things.
So if you have a disability, if you are struggling with depression, if you are struggling with anger perhaps, or if you are wheelchair bound, can it positively impact your case before a judge?
I don't know if it can positively impact, but
how does it help?
Well, you can ask for an accommodation. Whether if you have a communication issue, you can't lead a client. If you're doing a direct, the judge may allow you to lead the client. If there's or interpret what the client is saying. Maybe you ask the question, you let the client answer. If you've asked for that accommodation request, the attorney, if there is an attorney involved, may be able to repeat and have you confirm what was said. It can be very difficult if you have a communication disability to appear in court, and that will be a discussion you should have with your attorney about how to deal with that. I know that I have definitely represented many clients with an array of disabilities, and a good attorney will take your disability into an account and create a plan based on, and a strategy based on what is going to best meet your needs. There are some of the best attorneys work at Legal Services, are in the defense bar in Fairfax. I'm always amazed by the defense bar in Fairfax, to be really honest. The public defender's office is also the shining star of wonderful, wonderful public servants. So just let them know, speak with your attorney, build that repertoire, build that relationship. Don't shy away from telling the attorney that you are working with what you need and how to get your needs met. I've seen dogs in the courthouse because they are service dogs. So, there are ways. You might think that you can't do that. Ask your attorney. Have a conversation. Figure out how. Maybe your friend can bring the dog and you can leave to go visit with the dog outside. There are so many ways that we can accommodate people with disabilities if you need it.
Wow. So I guess the better question would have been, not would it have made a positive impact on your case, but that's essentially your opportunity to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and to speak to, if you got a court-appointed attorney, a public defender, legal services attorney, to speak to them about how it may impact the case, both negatively and what you can do to counter those negative effects. Because when you come up with a plan, the fact that you have a disability should not be affecting the outcome of the case, unless there are a couple of ways that it can affect the outcome, but it shouldn't. If you have a consumer case, your disability should not be negatively affecting that consumer case. I can't imagine why it would.
Okay, with 2 minutes left, so are there any topics that you want, or any go-backs that you want to leave our listeners and our viewers with when it comes to access to justice in Virginia?
I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking at what's happening in Fairfax and our housing market. You know, we all have experienced, whether you own or rent, that housing has become unattainable in this county. We have 5,000 vouchers. We have 23,000 households that are below the poverty line. So it's just, you know, we are not meeting our need. And it really, you know, when we were talking about poverty in Fairfax, in the Northern Virginia area, in the DMV, one of our biggest costs is housing. And it is so important that we come up with a real good plan and address our housing shortage in the county.
Absolutely. And so what can people do to, if they're so riveted by this conversation, what can they do to get in contact with you, Nermin?
They can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, we can have a conversation. You know, if you're particularly interested in housing, there are a bunch of committees in the county. Join one of those committees, make your point heard. There are so many different ways you can be involved. I really, really recommend sometimes just picking up the phone and calling your representative when something is bothering you. When you hear about a law coming through, I do it all the time.
Okay, so everyone, my favorite part of the show, you already know what it is. It's Would You Rather. We've talked about so many interesting things. So now is our opportunity, or your opportunity, to show our viewers the fun side of Nermin. So would you rather focus on developing your resilience or your perseverance?
Resilience.
Okay. Would you rather learn a new language or learn a new instrument?
A new instrument.
Do you play any instruments?
I don't. I speak Arabic.
Okay.
I don't read or write, but I'm not great at languages. I feel like the fact that I can speak Arabic is a great win.
It's impressive.
But I played the saxophone in high school and I was horrible at it. And I wish I had a good ear and I could, you know, carry a tune, which I can't.
Okay. Okay. Would you rather be good at telling jokes or good at telling a story?
In another life, I'm a comedian. I swear to God. And I always wanted to do stand-up comedy. Telling a joke by far.
Okay. Would you rather go to a comedy club with Kevin Hart or Dave Chappelle?
Kevin Hart.
Why?
I have no idea. I really like Dave Chappelle. I just think Dave Chappelle kind of needs his own stage. Like, going with him is not going to be
not the experience that you think it might be.
No. I feel like the light will just be on him. Am I going to watch Dave Chappelle? I'd pick Dave Chappelle. If I'm going with him, like this, no.
Okay. And last one. Okay. Would you rather be trained by Olivia Pope or Annalise Keating?
I'm Olivia Pope, 100%.
Hands down.
I was obsessed with that show. Obsessed. I've not been obsessed with the show as much as Scandal. Such a good show.
It was a wonderful show. But Annalise Keating, she can give you that edge right there, that sharp edge.
Even her style. I have outfits that are like my Olivia Pope inspired outfit.
Absolutely. Nermin, thank you so much for joining us on Inside Scoop. Make sure you join us next week. Have a wonderful evening.